East, and very good early morning to you if you're all the way out in the West. My name is Kari Cohen. I work for the Natural Resources Conservation Service here at USDA. I'm what we call the Projects Branch Chief. And it's my team that has responsibility for the Conservation Innovation Grants Program here at the national level. Welcome to the FY21, the fiscal year 21 as we call it, orientation for our awardees. Before we get started, just want to note that my staff has hit the record button, so we are going to record today's session for anyone that's not able to attend. So just be aware that this is being recorded and will be posted. So first of all, just want to say a big congratulations to you all. Conservation Innovation Grants has been around since 2004. A little known piece of trivia here is I was the very first national program manager for Conservation Innovation Grants right at the start of my NRCS career. So I'm very familiar with the program back even when we were accepting proposals on paper and managing everything on paper. So it's been a long time. I've been close to the program and then away from the program, and currently overseeing the staff that manages CIG here at the national level. The 2018 Farm Bill, as you're undoubtedly aware, expanded the scope of conservation innovation grants to the point where we now have two competitions. We have what we call the classic competition, which is basically the one that's been around since 2004. And then we have this new on-farm conservation innovation trials component. And those FY21 awardees, you all are the third set of awardees for what we affectionately call on-farm trials. So it takes a team of folks here at the national level to manage these projects, and in just a moment I'll introduce the team. And of course we also have state staff in all the states where you all will actually be carrying out your work, and some of you may be interacting with our state staff as well. Here at the program side of the house, we also interact a lot with our colleagues on the science and technology side of NRCS, and each of you will be assigned, if you haven't been already, a technical contact for your projects. And that's really the person who on the technical side of your activities you'll be interacting with on a regular basis. We started doing these awardee orientations a few years ago now. The first one we did in person, it actually might have been the first two, which was a really nice opportunity to get everybody together, including our technical folks, and have everyone meet each other and really build this community of awardees. Of course, it's been a little bit of a struggle since the pandemic, and we are still in this virtual environment. But you know, our hope is that in the future we'll find a way to bring all of you together in person to again start building this community where you all are doing similar things out there, especially within your specific priority areas. Okay, so really excited to have you all here. The orientation is really designed to get everybody on the same page, for you to understand your responsibilities, for you to understand how NRCS can help you make your projects a rousing success, and then at the end to tell everybody out there, our stakeholders and the public, about all the great things that you did. So I'm going to just take a few minutes here, introduce the team that you'll be interacting with the most over the next couple of days and throughout the life of your projects. And I'll just ask each of them to pop on, introduce themselves, talk about how they participate in the team, what their role is, and then we'll get moving. So why don't we start with our two primary co-hosts of the next couple of days. First off, we'll start with Leah Hermans. Leah, do you want to say hi?
Yes, hello everyone. As Kari said, my name is Leah Hermans. I'm the program manager for on-farm trials. So for all the on-farm trials awardees out there, you'll be hearing a lot from me tomorrow. I look forward to seeing some of your faces and answering all of your questions.
Great. And our other co-host, Caroline Sharoni. Caroline.
Hi, everyone. I'm Caroline Sharoni, and I'm the main program manager on the CIG Classic program. So you'll be hearing a lot from me today, going over a lot of the basic grants management materials. But thank you for coming, and I look forward to interacting more today.
Excellent. And we will now introduce our supporting cast. First up, let's talk to Havla Schumacher. Havla is currently on a detail helping out our colleagues over at the Urban Ag office here at NRCS, but she'll be back in the very near future, and undoubtedly you will hear from Havla. So Havla, go ahead.
Thanks for making me sound cooler, Kari. Havla Schumacher reporting to you out from West Virginia, although I am assigned to Kari's staff. I support Caroline and Leah on both programs.
All right, very good. We also have Kip Cherry. Kip is our lead technical person here on the program side of the house. Kip, do you want to say hi and talk about what you do?
Hello, everyone. Yes, I'm Kip Cherry. I work with new innovation that comes from the projects. So I'll be working with you some this week in the lightning rounds.
Very good. And finally, if I can remember who is on my staff, Jean Brewer, who helps us a whole lot on the operations side of the house. Jean, do you want to say hi and introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Jean Brewer. I support Leah and Caroline and Havla, and I handle the day-to-day operations for all the grants. And if you have any issues with financial reporting or progress reporting, you contact me. So, thanks. Glad to be here.
Thank you so much. All right, I'm going to turn it over to Caroline. Again, Caroline and Leah are really the engines behind this orientation and will guide you through today and tomorrow. I just wanted to pop on and say, again, congratulations. Really look forward to working with you over the next series of years as you get your projects up and running and through to completion. So Caroline, I'll just turn it over to you.
Sounds great. Thank you so much, Kari. And I'm going to pop up a presentation here. Okay, so I'm going to jump right into talking about grants management. But first, I'd like to just quickly say congratulations. And I really look forward to working with all of you over the next couple of years. I'm going to turn my camera off just so I don't distract either. So, and Jean or Leah, if you guys can get the people in the lobby, that would be great. Okay. So I'm just having trouble forwarding my presentation here. Let's see if I can do control. Just hold on 1 second. Why it won't present. Okay, usually I don't like to have technical difficulties so early on, but just give me a second to see. I think there's just a different, for some reason. Oh, there it goes. It was stuck. Okay, so for today's, our orientation is divided into 2 days. And for today, we're going to really be focusing on project management information. There's going to be 4 main talks. The first talk I'll give, and it's going to follow along with our new grantee orientation guide, and I'm going to send that out after the talk, and it has several appendices. But the thing to understand about federal grants management is everything has to get approved by 2 people, basically. So you have the program part of the house, which is myself, Leah, Jean, and Havla. But then we work collaboratively with the Fpac Grants and Agreements Division. And so almost everything we do, you know, agreements, invoices, amendments, all of that has to get approved by both houses, right, in our mission area. So I'm going to be talking about the orientation from the program viewpoint, and then Crystal Blackburn is going to join us at 1:15 and talk about it from basically the Grants and Agreements Division perspective. So hers is going to be a little bit more process oriented, and mine will be a little bit more content oriented. And then Jean is just going to cover some quick tips and tricks because she's the one who's doing a lot of the day-to-day operations. So she sees what a lot of people, what kind of slows things down, basically. So she's going to give you some tips to help move that forward. And then we're going to close out our orientation today with a talk on communications, because at USDA, we really are working harder to amplify the messages and the successes of our teams. So we want you to be thinking about that from the beginning of your award. Now, for the On-Farm Trials Awards, there's going to be more talks tomorrow. And Leah's has those organized, and those invitations only went out to On-Farm Trials awardees. So make sure if you're an On-Farm Trials awardee, you receive them. For the CIG Classic Awards, we're going to have tomorrow group discussions as well. I think most people tomorrow have one-on-one meetings with their technical contact. So not all of them are happening tomorrow, but if you have not received an invitation from your technical contact for a one-on-one meeting, please let myself or Leah know, and we'll help get that connection to happen. Okay. So again, we're going to send out by email today 2 toolkits. The first toolkit is going to be this new grantee guide with several appendices. So you'll have something in your email box to reference if you can't get a hold of someone and you have a question. The second one is going to be on the EasyFed grant system, the second toolkit we send out. That toolkit will come in many emails because the files are really large, unfortunately. So I was going to send them out right before, and I realized it would really probably mess up my computer, and I might not be able to give the talk. So I'll send those out right after. So just to go into starting your project. At this point in time, we have not completed all of the agreements. In fact, on-farm trials, I don't know, Leah, exactly the number. I think there's maybe like 5 or 6 agreements that have been completed. And most of those agreements, the paperwork has all been submitted, because Leah is about a month ahead of myself. Now, for CIG Classic, we're still working through a lot of those agreements. I've been able to contact about half of the teams. I think we only have one agreement so far that's been signed and started, that was just signed today, so the awardee might not even know. But the important thing is you cannot start work on your award until there is an agreement in place. And an agreement in place means that there are 2 signatures, your signature and an official USDA signature. Usually it's signed at the chief's level. So it takes a little while to get those signed. And once it's emailed to you, then it's fully executed, and you can start work once it's emailed to you with that signature. So often we contact you multiple times ahead of time to just work out little issues, and we always get your signature first. So the main message here is don't start work until you have your agreement. Now, if something's going on in your project, and let's say that if something doesn't happen now and it could cause a big disaster, please let us know. We do work with people sometimes to get pre-award costs approved, but it is another paper process. And so it can add time to the agreement process. So, you know, you'll have to fill out information to make that happen. But I just wanted to give you that heads up to contact us if there are any issues. But we are plugging through these agreements. They are getting done. But I apologize it's so slow. And just as a reminder, don't incur cost without an agreement in hand. So you can't bill us for work that's done before the start date of the agreement. Okay, so now that that's covered, I'll go into the detail of what I'm going to cover in my talk today on post-award management. So once you have your agreement in place, then you have to start doing all the other aspects to make sure this project gets going. So I'm going to go over who to contact and when. I'm going to give you a lot of details on match. Unlike a lot of federal awards, the CIG agreements all require a non-federal match. So, you know, a lot of times this trips up a lot of the universities, and it's another added layer of paperwork for everyone. But it's really important, and we're kind of stuck with it. We can't give you much flexibility with that. So I want to go over what those requirements are. Also, I'll review quickly payment requests and reporting responsibilities. In addition, we at the end of projects, we do evaluations. I'm going to go over agreement modifications as well, environmental compliance, as well as communicating project success. And I'll just cover that briefly because this year Havala is going to give a full talk on that. So to start, who's who at NRCS? There are a lot of contacts you're going to find out, and it can be really confusing. So I wanted to lay this out on a slide. So hopefully this will help clarify things for everyone. For these projects, your first point of contact actually isn't going to be myself or Leah. It's going to be the person we assign as the technical contact. And these really vary on projects because we are looking through NRCS for experts, and we get them assigned because they really understand what your project is about. So they give better oversight than we would at headquarters. But you'll also be interacting regularly with headquarters CIG staff. And as Kari did, he introduced all of us. 3 of us are program managers, myself, Leah, and Havala. Havala actually manages all of the state SIG information. So sometimes if you ever have state SIG questions, she's a good go-to. That's a whole nother program though. And as well, Jean Brewer, who is going to talk as well today. But then you'll also have an Fpac admin contact, and you'll see these names on the agreements. So the 2 main Fpac contacts for the SIG program are Ann Mulvaney and Jose Berna. So I just gave you a big list of people's names, and it can be really overwhelming, right? Like in the moment, who do I contact? Because of that, we developed an NRCS SIG general email box that we're always checking. So basically, when in doubt, just send it to that email box and we'll make sure it gets to the right person. So write this email box down if you don't already have it. So now I'm going to I'm going to go into detail about the NRCS technical contact. The job of the NRCS technical contact, again, is to provide the technical oversight. So even though they're not on the first page of the agreement, they're actually listed under the responsibilities of the parties within the agreement. It is their job to ensure that the project objectives are met. And again, these are NRCS subject matter experts. So they understand what your project's about. A lot of times they're very excited. Often they were involved in the panels in selecting these projects. So they go into these projects really understanding the potential. And it's going to be this person that's going to be reviewing your progress reports and approving them. As well, they're the person you're going to probably talk to the most about technical questions. You know, they're going to be the ones, if there's any questions in the progress reports, they're going to reach out to you, have a phone call. Pre-COVID, they would visit at least once during the life of the project. Hopefully we'll be able to do that again. Of course, no one has visited any of our projects in 2 years. But one of the really great things about getting a grant with NRCS, as opposed to one of the other grant agencies like Nepa or, you know, what is it, National Science Foundation or whatever, is, you know, NRCS has loads of technical experts working on the ground. And therefore, NRCS has tons of resources. And so one of the real values of assigning a technical expert to these projects is they not only do oversight for us, but they become a resource for you. they can access NRCS information and resources for you and help explain NRCS processes. So there's a real benefit there that you won't find from other granting agencies. In addition, we look to the technical experts to approve award amendments. So, you know, sometimes we get into situations, projects don't go as planned and there's an agreement change. We're going to look to them to approve if there's been a change in deliverables or a modification in objectives or anything like that. And we also look to the technical expert to do an overall project evaluation at the very end, you know, to sign off and explain to us, you know, the value this project, you know, gives to the American public, as well as to if there was any to NRCS. So, you know, we really look to the technical expert as the first, your main point of contact. But when it comes to administrative questions and processes, you really want to contact the National CIG headquarters. And the person on the agreement is myself or Leah, who are the program managers. So we really weigh in for all of these administrative questions. You know, how do I do this? You know, so when it comes to EasyFed grants or paperwork or anything like that, you won't be contacting the GAD contact. You should be contacting myself, Leah, or of course you can contact us as well through the NRCS inbox. And one of the main reasons is that you'll be interacting a lot with us is we process invoices. We don't ask our technical contacts to process the invoice. We process all of those at the headquarters level. So as well, even though the technical contact has to sign off on amendments, we are the ones shuffling it through the process. We're like the experts, and we'll be interacting with GAD and making sure that they get what you submit. So, and we track it all. So we are in regular contact with the technical contact, the NRCS technical contact, and we will, they will reach out to us, or we'll reach out to them if there are issues or successes in the project. We communicate regularly. So again, here, I just wanted to highlight that the grant specialist at the Fpac Business Center is on the grant agreement in box 8, but they are not really your first line of contact. A lot of times contact gets lost if you reach out to them. So it's always best to track through the NRCS CIG inbox because everything that comes in pretty much we track. So the next thing I want to talk about is the non-federal budget portion of the project, what we call match. So for all of CIG agreements, we have a required match in the NFO, and it really depends on the component. There's 3 different components of CIG match. For regular CIG Classic, every project team has to meet 50% of the total project budget with their own non-federal funding or match. For historically, like for projects that have been successfully applied to the historically underserved part of CIG Classic, they are required to meet at least 33%, and on-farm trials is required to meet 20% of the total project budget. Now, this is very important because what happens is if you don't meet this match by the end of the project, basically you're going to be responsible to pay the federal government back. So we never want anyone to get into that situation, and we want to figure things out earlier if there are problems going on in the project. So we basically give you a lot more freedom in terms of invoicing. You don't have to report match in detail. We're not asking for supporting documentation on match, but you do have to report match on the SF-270, and your proposal gives us a detailed budget of match. Therefore, we know about how much is being spent each year, so we can track it. So if we see invoices that aren't marking match, we will kick those back, or usually we'll just email you the first few times we see that. But if it goes on for a long time and we don't see match regularly growing or the match tracking with the federal, we'll actually kick it back and try to figure out what's going on in the project. And this is really important for our program because a couple years ago, our program was audited by OIG and we were found to be lacking in our ability to manage the match, and we weren't making sure that people were reporting on match. And because of that, our program now has a process of audits, match audits, and every year 5% of our awards are selected for match audits. So any one of you can be selected to do a match audit, and usually that is going to be the projects that get flagged for things. So we want to encourage you to get your reports in on time and to make sure your match is reflected in these documents when you send them in, and that things are tracking. And if things aren't tracking right, reach out to us and let us know. Don't let us know when we see the paperwork. If there's a problem, give us a heads up, and that will help avoid your team getting flagged for an audit. But anyway, match is important and it's got to get reported on the SF 270. The 270 is the standard form 270, which is the payment request. As well, it has to get reported on the standard form 425, which is the federal financial form that is required annually. And we will be checking for it. So this is a new slide. I didn't have this slide in a couple of years ago. I just wanted to bring up really quickly, because this is something that has come up this year, is a lot of your teams are just getting their agreements in place. And of course, the next step is going to be getting your contracts and subawards in place. And I just want to remind everyone that if you are doing subawards, it's very important that you flow down federal language to those subawards. We found recently some of our older awards did not do that and they didn't go well. And it can get very complicated because they put a lot of the money into equipment, and basically that equipment is owned by the federal government, right? But the subawardee who did that didn't have the flow down language, right? So things get very complicated, and you're required to flow down the agreement language from the federal agreement to your subawards. So therefore, if you define someone as a contractor or a subawardee, it really makes a difference. Contractors are groups that are usually just paid hourly. So the structure of the agreement is more simple, basically. But if you have questions on that ahead of time, especially if we haven't already finalized your agreement, just let us know. So now I'm going to go over payment requests. Payment requests are, of course, or claims or invoices, however you want to describe them, are a very important part of these projects happening, obviously. But it gets a little complicated because we really want to see these invoices submitted through the Easy Fed grant system. It's written into the agreement that that's where you're supposed to submit them. And if you submit your claims here, your payment requests here, things go smoother, basically, for us. Just so you know, we ask most of these projects to do reimbursable claims, right? We can do advances, but advances are much more complicated, and you're going to have to give us a heads up at the beginning of the project about that, because we actually have to put money in a different kind of pot for advances. Advances don't go through Easy Fed grants, so it's the process is more laborious, actually, and more complicated. So we really encourage people to do the reimbursements through Easy Fed grants, and that's the simplest way to basically process everything. But just a couple things. Our process is that we get 30 days to reimburse a claim. The reality is it's much, much faster. I would say most claims are reimbursed between 1 to 2 weeks of submission. In addition, we can only process one claim at a time in the EasyFed grant system. So, you know, if something's returned or there's a question on an old claim, we try to notify you by email. A lot of times that can be really confusing for people, though. But basically, you won't be able to submit a new claim if the first claim hasn't been paid or fully rejected and returned. So just a heads up on that. So when you submit claims through EasyFed grants, you actually submit them on an electronic standard form 270. So any of you who have had federal grants in the past, you're familiar with the standard form 270, which is the payment request form for federal agencies. And basically, this form has been built into EasyFed grants. So, you know, it makes signing it and stuff like that easy. It's all electronic, so all that information is in a system. It just helps with tracking. But I want to remind everyone on that form, there is one line and you need to fill in the match then on that form in there, because sometimes I think it's missed. A lot of times the accounting office isn't necessarily in communication with the PD and they leave it off. For those of you not familiar with the SF270, we do have instructions in the new grantee guide that I will send out. And as well, we keep the new grantee guide on our website. Crystal, after my talk, Crystal's going to give us a little bit more detail on the 270. So I'm not going to go into too much. But one of the other things about CIG specifically is this program requires that you submit supporting documentation with your invoice. Again, this is a very specific CIG requirement, and because a lot of other federal programs don't have this requirement, it can get confusing, and this is probably the number one reason payment requests are held up, is because people don't actually send us supporting documentation. So we have attached to the new grantee guide a full description of what we mean by supporting documentation, just so you understand it better. But basically, there's major line items in the proposal, and those are personnel, fringe, travel, supplies, contractual, other, indirect. But basically, we want information beyond that. We don't want information as detailed as receipts, but we do want to know, you know, if you're charging for personnel, who are you charging that for, or what's the position that's being charged for? And whatever you put on there, basically, we're checking it against the project narrative. So, you know, we're just trying to make sure that the charges that are getting charged are as put in the proposal. And so, again, the supporting documentation doesn't have to be extensive. It only has to be like a half to a page. But you do have to give more than the major categories. So for instance, travel should include dates, locations, who traveled, and you can just write it in a sentence. It doesn't have to be fancy. It doesn't have to be on an Excel sheet. It can be very simple and straightforward. As well, supplies, you don't have to give receipts, but just list if it was farm supplies, field supplies, monitoring supplies, things like that. So then we can look at that and track it with the project narrative and, you know, check the box and make sure spending is aligning as intended. But as one more reminder, we do not need copies of receipts. Sometimes it is the easiest way, so you're welcome to send it in, especially with contractors. I find a lot of people send in contractor receipts, but it's not a requirement. Now, if you were audited at that point in time, you would need to share your receipts with us, and therefore you need to, even though we're not asking for it for the claims, to be processed, you do still need to make sure you're saving all of that information. So I've just given you a lot of information, and I think the biggest problem is EasyFed grants isn't always user-friendly and people get glitches. So especially in the beginning of these awards, it takes a while for people to get into it and get used to it. So there is a workaround if you are not able to process your invoice through EasyFed grants. You can always send it to the Fpac email, and that email address is in the agreement. If you don't remember it, or if you don't write it down, you can also just email our Nrcs SIG box with it, and we'll forward the invoice for you. And if you do send your invoice not through EasyFed grants, but directly to the Fpac inbox, we recommend you copy the Nrcs inbox just so we can help track it for you as well, and so it doesn't get missed. Also, I want to bring everyone's attention to the EasyFed grants help desk email. It's been on a couple of these slides already, but this is a critical email a lot of times, because EasyFed grants does take a while to get into, and you'll end up emailing with the help desk a lot. If they're not responsive, let us know. A lot of times we can help the process. Usually they'll respond, but sometimes they don't always understand people's questions because they're dealing with a lot of emails. So we'll support you there. Just let us know. But there is a help desk, and 95% of the time they're very, very helpful. So next I want to cover reporting. There's two types of reports that are required throughout the life of these projects. The first is the technical report, the technical progress report, and the second is the financial report. So the technical progress report is due basically every 6 months. And the financial report, or what we call the SF425, it's a standard federal financial report form, that's due every year. One of the things you'll find, though, is sometimes we run into glitches in EasyFed grants because other NRCS programs require SF425s quarterly, but the SIG program does not. We only require it annually. So sometimes things get goofed up. If you see that they're being requested quarterly, please let us know. As well, so those reports are on a calendar from the start date. They're either every 6 months, 7 months from the very beginning, or every year for the financial report. But then for project closeout, you're going to be required to hand in a final technical report, and that final technical report is actually a different template in a different format than the progress report. This year we had to kick back a whole bunch of final reports because they were using the progress report format. But what we need is for you to report in the end on the whole project. Because unlike our progress reports, our final reports are posted on our website and available to the public. So they need to read a little bit differently. You're not just informing the technical contact on details, but you're really informing the whole world as to the story of your project. As well, we require a cumulative federal financial form at closeout. That you'll be used to doing those by then, though, so they're always cumulative. So we have a progress report template, and that's going to be sent out in the toolkit. It's also, as everything that we send out is available on the grantee page of the SIG website. So please use this template when you send in progress reports. Progress reports should be submitted through EasyFed grants. So what happens is EasyFed grants will create what we call a shell file the first day after the reporting period. So if you try to submit your report early, you will not be able to do that. So for instance, if your project starts April 15th, The reporting periods are 6 months. So the reporting period will go from April 15th to October 15th. Therefore, October 16th, a shell file will appear in EasyFed Grants. And at that point, you will get a full month to submit your report for that reporting period. And this as well is the way it is for the SF425. After a year, a day after the year, your reporting period is annual. So the shell file will appear, and for a month after that, you can submit actually longer. I mean, if you're late with your report, they'll stay open. But with the SF425, you're using a format embedded within EasyFed Grants. But for the progress report, you need to use our template on our website that we'll also be sending you today. And again, if you don't find these things when they're due, which, you know, they'll basically be due 7 months from the start of your agreement, your first report, just email us. We're more than happy to just send you the template. So for progress reports, they'll pick up after that. So again, if the reporting period is from April 15th to October 15th, the report will be due November 15th, but then your next report will be due 6 months after November 15th. It would be due May 15th, covering October 16th to, let's see, April 14th or whatever. I don't know if I got those dates quite right, but okay, so again, you're supposed to submit the reports for progress reports and financial reports within 30 days. Now, for the final reports, you'll get more time, but I just want to go over a little bit about technical content of progress reports, because a lot of times we'll get, you know, initial progress reports aren't usually very long, but you know, this is the official documentation. So, you know, 4 years down the road, if someone has a question, a lot of times they'll dig into these reports. They're trying to understand the data and the projects. And so if you don't give us a lot of information, it becomes very difficult for your project to get utilized, actually. Plus, there are federal requirements for data. So it's really important in these reports that you don't just tell us what you're doing, but you show us what you're doing. You include summaries and graphs and descriptions of activities. So we really know what's going on with the project. Again, you'll be talking to the technical contact and telling them, but this is the only documentation of the project really we have, project activities. So it's very important you put stuff in there. These things don't have to be very long though. Even if you share the data, a lot of times they can just be summaries of what's going on. So that's okay. Or you can just attach appendices. A lot of times people will send, you know, if you develop a deliverable such as a fact sheet or some sort of, you know, training document, you should be attaching those as they are created. You don't have to wait till the final report. You can attach them to these progress reports. So, you know, NRCS has, everyone at NRCS that needs them can have access to them, especially the technical contact. As well, you need to make sure in these reports that you talk about challenges and delays, because this is the official documentation. A lot of budget changes that are minor, you don't actually have to request an amendment for them. So it becomes important to write that into the report. As well, it can just help us save time, because if we see a problem on an invoice, we'll go to these reports and we will ask people, let's see, sorry. We'll go to these reports and we will be able to see if, like, you know, there are problems going on, and it'll actually allow us to still move forward with an invoice and not hold it up. So I'm going to go over really quickly the standard federal financial form. We check this annually. You're going to fill it out directly in EasyFed grants. If you're having problems with EasyFed grants, though, you can use the old paper form, and we have a copy of that in our new grantee guide that we're sending you. Again, it's due 30 days, just like progress reports but this is due annually from the anniversary of the start date. Again, like claims, be sure to, I'm getting very repetitive here, be sure that you mark your match funding. As well, let's see, you're obligated to maintain your auditable records on the match funding. And this is one of the few places we can see that you're actually spending down match. But again, we won't ask for that match information unless you're audited. So I actually have an image here of some of the expenditure forms, the expenditures and the recipient share. So the SF425 form is confusing. So if you've never used it before, please don't hesitate to ask us. We are checking these, and Jean Brewer is the main person who does the checks on these, and she'll email you if they're not filled out correctly when you submit them. But the main parts that you need to fill out are basically lines F through K. There's 6 lines, and basically they're showing us how much of the federal money you've been spending down and how much of the match, the non-federal money, you've been spending down. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time going over the final report because I've already mentioned it, and a lot of you aren't going to think about these for 2 to 5 years, but in general, final reports, we want you to write them in plain language because, again, these are available to the general public. You know, I describe writing the final report as actually like making a piece of art because you've got a lot of technical information and you're trying to make it very user friendly and you're trying to turn it into a story. So you've got to give a lot of you got to dig back into the proposal and, you know, summarize a lot of that original background and rationale, as well as the objectives, and talk about if things went well or didn't go well and why that is, and, you know, what the deliverables in the end were. And because these grants are paid for by the American people, the deliverables have to be available to the American people. So, you know, a lot of times we just let you put a link there, but we need to get a copy because if that link ever dies or whatever, we still need access to that information that we've paid for. As well, each project we will do a project evaluation. These started out mainly to just make sure Nrcs internally becomes aware, but also they really help us in amplifying the successes of the project. As well, we'll record any problems if there were major problems on the project. It does feed into like a risk review for future projects, but that's not usually a problem for most projects. But really, we want to know the lessons learned to make sure NRCS is a large organization, and we do try to take the information and filter it through NRCS, so NRCS throughout the country in the places where it's related do know about your information. Okay, we'll get a break here soon, I promise. Agreement modifications. So unexpected things happen in these projects. Very, very often. Change in personnel, change in scope of work, budget changes, no cost extensions. It's rare a project doesn't have to do at least one agreement modification. So we have specific forms that need to get filled out. So as soon as you need a modification of any sort, please email our NRCS inbox and we will mail you that form, the most recent version of that form. So no cost extensions are probably the most common modification we get, and they're pretty straightforward. The key here is to notify us before the agreement ends. So we've had a couple situations where project teams have not notified us and the agreement ends, and then they come back to us, and without any information that documents that they requested no cost extension, we can't extend the project. We have no flexibility there. You can't request a no cost extension after the end of the project. So let us know as soon as you know, basically. And we really, when projects are getting near the end date, we usually send out emails. We really try to avoid these situations of projects having to close out before they truly are over. But it's very easy to get a first year no cost extension. It used to be a little harder to get a second year no cost extension, although with COVID, I think they've relaxed their guidelines on that. But just so you're aware, you know, you need to have a reason for a no cost extension. We don't just hand them out, but usually a first year is just not a big deal at all. Budget changes. So budget changes usually do not require agreement amendments unless you're changing the budget more than the total budget by 10% or more. Now, even though we say that, we still like to see those changes. So again, if you're going to have, if you're going to make a budget change, give us a heads up, email the TC. As well, we ask that you report on it in the progress report. There are a few instances, and Crystal's going to go through these, when you basically need to do a budget amendment even though the budget is less than 10%. There's several situations that require what we call prior approvals. For instance, if you're going to change a contractor, normally a change within a line item does not require an amendment, and a prior approval isn't exactly an amendment. It has a different process and signature requirement, but you will need to get prior approval on things like that. So again, Crystal's going to cover that in more detail. Just be aware, if you don't know, just reach out to us and we'll let you know if you need an amendment or not. If you have anything, oh, as well, I wanted to mention on budget, actually, let me go back. Another issue with budget has been match, and I've already stated with match, we can change the match, but we cannot change the match below the requirement in the NFO. So if you're giving like above 50% match, we can, you know, we can approve the budget change as long as the match doesn't go below that 50%. Okay. So changes in scope of work. These are much more complicated, but projects don't always go as planned. So a lot of times we want to see good results from these projects. We want the money to be spent well. So if something isn't going as planned, we ask that you work with your technical contact right away and start talking to them. You know, work with them in terms of what would be an appropriate way to maybe redesign an objective or something else, so we can still get good results from the project. But all of this requires an amendment, so you know, it's a process to do it, and ultimately it's going to get signed off by the technical contact. So we ask that it's best to just work with them from the beginning. As well, changes in key personnel, we have a form for that. You know, we only require that you notify us really if there's a change. You only need, it's not really a full amendment, but you only have to fill out the form if there's a change to the people who are on the front page of the agreement. If you have co-PDs, please give that information in the progress reports. You don't need to notify us for something like that. So environmental compliance and cultural resources. So there's 3 federal environmental laws that we have to adhere to with the CIG program. Basically, the projects, or in some cases for on-farm trials, the project sites have to be reviewed at the state level and given approval that they have, that no bad ground disturbing activities, no basic harm to the environment is going to happen from these. We need to get NRCS state people to sign off on this. So basically, Leah and I will send these projects off to the state. We'll do an e-directive internally and we'll ask the states to review these. It gets confusing though, because we don't always know if a project, when your sites are going to be active or not. Sometimes you know where your sites are from the start of a project. Sometimes you haven't determined them and you might not determine them for another year. So, we'll send an email, a general email out to everyone getting that information so we can get the state started on this. We may reach out in another year as well to follow up, just to make sure we're in compliance. But the states will usually contact you and, especially if there's any flags, or they might ask you questions so we can move forward. But basically, I think from the participant, from the awardee standpoint, this is a little confusing, but basically the states will reach out to you. And if you have an award or a site, like if on your award, your sites are not going to be known for a while, you're going to have to reach out to that state. But you should, if you don't have a state contact, just reach out to us and we'll let you know. So I'm not going to go into any detail on public affairs and communicating projects. Havila is going to talk a lot more about that, but basically we want to help you amplify your project successes. So when you do have media pieces that have gone out, or if you have a workshop you want, more people to know about, just let us know and we will share that with our communications team. Another thing I want to remind everyone of is to make sure that you always reference NRCS and the CIG program and give a shout out to it and give it credit that the money for your work is coming from this program. If people don't advertise that the money is from CIG, people don't understand the value of the program. So we really need you to give the credit where the credit's due. We can share the USDA logo with you. I have a link to it on our website right now. If that doesn't work though, just let us know. Okay, so my critical takeaways today are the NRCS CIG at USDA.gov inbox is the catch-all email. So when in doubt, email there. Progress reports are due semi-annually. That's twice a year, every 6 months. Financial reports are due annually. All reports should be submitted to EZ-Fed grants. We can work with you on a workaround initially if that doesn't work, but ultimately things are going to be a lot smoother if all the reports are going in there, because everything then is automated. If you have EZ-Fed grants questions, please email their help desk. If you're having problems with the help desk for any reason, like they don't understand the question or they're not getting back to you, please let us know and we will assist you there. I'm going to send you 2 toolkits today, a toolkit of EZ-Fed grants, job aids, as well as a toolkit with the new grantee guidelines book with the appendices I mentioned. So look for those in your email by the end of the day. Okay, so with that, I'll take questions. Sorry, that was a very long talk. Okay, Russ. Let's see, I think I gotta unmute you. No, you did it. Okay, good. Hey, Russ.
Hey, it's nice to meet you in person, Carolyn. How often as a percentage are the grantees audited?
It's 5% of our grants are audited. So,
Right.
and it's not a horrible process. I mean, it's gone really well so far. We've been doing this for about 3 years, and when it happens, you know, it's usually the projects that are getting flagged are the ones that aren't, you know, submitting reports on time. They're not reporting match, things like that. There's definitely a focus on match that'll flag projects because it's a match audit mainly. But yeah, just send in the receipts. Basically, people just send us all their receipts, and you know, the better organized, the easier it goes. So,
and I presume that since we haven't signed a contract, we're not being reimbursed for time spent today.
So I had sent out an email actually early on, and if you need to get reimbursed for today, we can submit pre-award costs for it. If your team needs that. I think for most teams, it's, you know, it's just a couple hours and it's not a big deal, but we can do that for you.
Great, thank you.
Okay, any other questions? I think there's a question in the chat. Let me look at this. See if I can get to it. Leah, are you, can someone read the, oh wait.
Yep, I'm checking now.
Okay. Yeah, no, I think it was just the hand up. Okay. Are there any other questions? Okay, Nikki Brinson.
Yeah, hi. I have a question
Hi.
on the match.
Yep.
Sometimes, you know, we get big chunks of match up front from partners or towards the beginning of the grant, and it kind of goes down. Do we need to ensure on the 270 that the match is just the minimum and kind of stretch that out, or do we actually report it in the, you know, the time frame that we receive it all? So what I'm saying is, you know, we could have several 270s that have a bunch of match at the beginning, and then it kind of dwindles off a little bit. But is our goal to focus on the overall match?
So it sounds like you're getting match from outside. Usually you report match on the invoice as it's getting spent, right? So a lot of times match is like people's volunteer time. And if it's volunteer time, you have to record it. You record the date it happens. It's, you know, most people just keep a checklist, an Excel file with the person's name, the date, and the hours, and then the value of those hours. It can be very simple. But if you're actually getting a check from another organization, you're receiving that money in, but you're not spending it down. So you wouldn't necessarily report it on the invoice when you receive it. You'll report it on your claim when you spend it. Does that make sense?
Yep, I'm with you. Thank you.
Yep. Okay, can we apply for additional USDA grants? I didn't read the end of that, but the answer is yes. By having an active CIG grant, it does not stop you from applying for any other federal grants, including another CIG project. I don't know where those questions came from because I'm not seeing them. Oh, there are questions in the chat. Okay, can we apply? Okay, I am seeing from Courtney, does the grant award allow for startup funds milestone payments? So Courtney, I'm not sure I understand that question. You can use grant funding for startup costs, but it should be in the proposal already. Okay, does that answer the question? Courtney?
I was just given these questions from Rick that wasn't able to be on, so I was just
Okay.
putting those in there. I think he was more wanting to know since it's going to cost a lot more, so I'm not sure how they have that written in there, but I was just told to ask.
Okay, does the grant award allow for okay. Yeah, I maybe have him email me because I don't know if I'm really, I mean, CIG awards are definitive where you can't get extra money. Like, you know, they're competed, it goes through this whole approval process, the chief approves the amount, so we can't really give you more funding like at other grant agencies. A lot of times you can sometimes get non-competitive funding once you've started a project. But you know, if it's just about changing a line item, that's very doable. And the CIG program does allow for startup funding for some things. His other question is, since grant submittal, there have been considerable cost increases related to post-COVID supply chain related issues. While efforts will be made to manage within the original estimated budget, is there a mechanism for recognizing these supply chain increases? So this is very complicated, right? Because you're going into an agreement with us to do a specific objective and it's got a specific cost. And, you know, we don't have any flexibility to increase that amount. And we've got those, you know, that goal and those objectives are the ones approved by our panel. So, you know, some negotiation has to take place if there's going to be changes, if you anticipate the budget's going to cost more. You know, something might have to be removed from the project, and you really have to, if your agreement isn't finalized, I recommend negotiating that up front. But if the agreement is finalized, that's a budget amendment, basically, in most cases.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, can we work with producers with current equip contracts as part of our on-farm demonstration projects? Will our farmer incentive payments be considered duplicative payments?
Caroline, you want to take this one?
Yeah, Leah, I think you should take it.
All right,
you.
sounds good. That's an excellent question that we're definitely going to cover during tomorrow's on-farm trials session. The answer is complicated. It depends. Kind of the bottom line is we can't pay for the same work. So a producer can have an equip contract to do something completely different than what you're paying them an incentive payment for, but they cannot have an equip contract that overlaps with any part of your project if the contract pays for the same work that is covered by your incentive payments. There are very few exceptions that I haven't actually seen an exception yet, but if there were a case where your incentive payment was covering something that went above and beyond or was you know, much different than the equip standard practice, then we could discuss having some, you know, an appropriately set incentive for that increase. But duplicative payments are really paying for the same practice on the same field at the same time, and that's just not allowed. It's double dipping. But yeah, I'd be happy to go in more details about that tomorrow.
Okay, that probably brought up a lot of other questions. We missed a question early on here. Is it okay for match sources to change from the original proposal? Yes, it's okay. Again, you'll want to let us know about it, but that's happened numerous times. Does it require an amendment or a prior approval? It depends. Most likely, if it's less than 10%, it would probably not require an amendment. I think this is something that the CIG program group is more interested in than grants management, so it probably doesn't require prior approval. I'll look into that. I don't think we've done prior approvals on this in the past, but If it actually involves getting a new contractor in any way, it may. But other than that, I think we can just notify the TC, and that most likely would be enough. And we might have to get like a letter stating it, the commitment. But we'll work with you on that. Also, I want to bring to your attention one of the technical contacts, Cheryl Simmons. She said that it's a good idea to double check with your technical contact on if something is ground disturbing or not, because also it could you have instances where things can affect the cultural resources of the land. So it's always good to just double check. Thanks, Cheryl. Okay, I felt like someone had a hand up and I'm not seeing it. Okay. Let me get out of the chat so I can see whose hand that is. Okay, Cheryl.
Sorry about that. Hey,
Alright.
so I was just going to mention on those double practices. It's a little tricky as she was mentioning, and it's just even the same name can trigger something. So you just have to really double check on this practice. I'm sure she'll cover that tomorrow. But we ran into that before where it's actually was a little different practice, but they were calling it the same name as one of our practices. And so it threw up red flags. So it just might be you need to be real specific, pardon me, specific about what you're talking about. Thanks, sorry.
Okay. Thanks, Cheryl. Yeah, that I could see that being a problem or causing confusion. Any other questions? Okay.
Carolyn, I think we just got one more in the chat.
Oh, we got another one in the chat. Okay. Are the reimbursements paid to the single entity that then pays the contractor? Yes. Or do we pass through invoices from contractors that you pay? No, we will not pay the contractor. We basically will only pay the person we're in an agreement with. Your sub-awardees and contractors, those are separate agreements you have, so you're responsible to pay them. Okay, let's see, Suti, Eric. Okay. Should we report request changes in budget if it is more than 10% for any category? No, it's more than 10% of the total project budget. So if you have changes, let's say you're going to do some, you've done some changes to your project, you're no longer going to travel, you're going to do a bunch of virtual trainings. So you no longer need money in your travel, and you're moving money that's just 5% of travel to the other category to pay for online training stuff like software or something. That basically is moving between categories. That's an example of when you're moving between categories. So if that amount is 10% of the total budget, that's federal and non-federal, that's when you would need a federal a budget amendment. If it's less, you don't, but those things are cumulative. So if you do 5% now, and then the next year you do 5%, you're up to 10% at that point. And at that point, you would need to request an amendment. And that's why it's really important to notify us of all changes, because if you end up in that position where you have to request an amendment, you don't want it to get denied. What reporting documentation is required for producer payments? Leah? Do you want to answer that?
Sorry, could you ask the question one more time? I was just looking back through the chat.
It's at the very, it's the last one. What reporting documentation is required for producer payments?
Oh, okay. So this is similar to the other reporting documentation. We don't need any kind of specific contracts that you sign with the producers. We just want to know what amount goes to each producer. So it can just be a simple write-up saying that Joe Smith received $400 for grazing management practices. But we can go into more detail about incentive payments during the on-farm trials portion of the orientation tomorrow morning. But great question.
Okay, for budget changes, is it 10% over the entire project period? Yes. So your example for 9% change in year one, if you do 9% budget change in year one, you do not have to request an amendment. But then if you do a 5% change in year three, at that point, you're at 14% total budget change from the original budget, and you would have to send in a amendment. So hopefully that helps. Okay, let's see. Any other questions? You can raise your hand too if you prefer, or put it in the chat.
Caroline, just a couple that I'm seeing from earlier on.
Okay.
There was a question about whether pictures can be included in the final report, and Cheryl answered this, but just to kind of echo what she's saying, yes, pictures are welcomed as part of the final report. And then she also asked what type, or sorry, we had a separate question, which Caroline, I'm not sure if you've gotten to already, but what type of activities are considered ground disturbing activities?
Leah, do you want to answer that?
Caroline, I'll let you take this one because I know that this has changed a bit in the past year, or it's been something we've been refining.
Yeah, and it is more than ground disturbing activities. I mean, basically, we have to adhere to those 3 acts, right? So we have to make sure there's no environmental disasters coming from the project. So, you know, if you take a site and it's a farm and they're actively farming the land, and you're going to add a cover crop to the land, that's not really, my understanding is that's not really new ground disturbing activity. Like, the land is being used as it's being used. But if you're gonna, you're gonna actually insert tile drainage or something, you're gonna dig something up. At that point, there is ground disturbing activities. So even though a lot of that stuff is, it's not a big deal and the actual environmental risk is low, we still have to call it out. We still have to basically do paperwork on it to be compliant. And it's basically the NRCS state offices that make that determination if we do need to do anything or not. Usually it's just about doing the paperwork. It's very, very few projects that anyone feels are really a high environmental risk. But as Cheryl said too, it's about historical information too, like things like land that could have arrowheads or something like that. I don't really understand all of that, but the NRCS office will flag it if there's any historical significance to the land. And so that's also part of this review that happens. Hopefully I answered that okay. We're still learning about this too. Leah and I have been in many meetings over the past 3 months just trying to understand that piece. So hopefully we'll have more information for you soon. Okay. When should we do monthly instead of quarterly claims? Okay, so our agreement states that you should do quarterly claims. The only reason you would do a monthly claim is if your organization basically can't manage on quarterly claims. So we do allow monthly claims in those instances because a lot of our organizations we work with are small, and for them to wait 3+ months to get reimbursed is just not an option. So it just basically it depends. Usually universities, we like to see quarterly claims. There's not a lot of universities have the capacity to do quarterly claims, and for us it takes as much time to do a monthly as a quarterly claim. So, you know, we really want people to do quarterly claims, but we do understand with small organizations. So if they do a monthly claim, we're not going to complain. How long does an amendment approval take generally? So this is one of these things that we have gotten a lot better with. They can be as quick as 2 days, to be honest. In general, they're probably about a week. I think historically they've been like a month, but our processes have really improved a lot. And if basically it doesn't get approved within a week after you submit, email us, ask us what's going on, and we'll check for you. Meaning if we put in an amendment, yeah, and that's from submitting the paperwork to our inbox. So
Caroline, I just want to add adding to that. I believe we say it can take up to 30 days. So especially for things that might be more complicated, if you have a budget amendment, for example, that might need some discussion with your technical contact and a program manager, we encourage you very much to submit those early so we can get working on it, so we can get them started. Caroline's answer was dead on that for the most part, our turnaround is very quick, but we would say plan on the longer scale of 30 days for things that might be more complicated.
thank you.
And also, last thing to add to that, for the no cost extensions, like Caroline said, we need to do those before your project ends, and would really strongly encourage you to do that with that 30-day buffer. Just in worst case scenario, if something was to get lost in the shuffle of an email, we don't want to find out a day before your project expires. We want that time to make sure everything goes through smoothly and there are no glitches and we don't leave you out in the cold without the access to finish up your project.
Yeah, your first no cost extension request can happen at any time. So we encourage, I think the ideal time is about 6 months before the end of the project. So that allows everything to be in place. So you can keep paying people. I think that's the problem people run into when they leave it to the end. Even if they're within the required time period, they get into this uncomfortable situation where they don't have the approval, especially if you're at the university and your accounting people are like, well, this is your end date. So, you know, they stop claims from happening and you can't pay your sub-awardees. Another person asked, do we need to get prior approval for monthly claims? No, you don't. But if you aren't sending in quarterly, we might ask. We might email you and ask, especially if your invoices are really small, like under $1,000. I have emailed universities and asked them numerous times to give us quarterly because I feel like they don't really have an excuse, but I haven't done that to small organizations. Let's see, when should I do that? We're on basic Nepa and cultural resource review. So Cheryl has a text in there. More on basic Nepa and cultural resource reviews. Examples include American Indian burial plots that may be in place, historic trails identified, and more. It's a great and interesting area of conservation practice implementation. Thanks, Cheryl. Do our annual funds carry over in case we have any activities that are postponed into the next year or remaining funds? Yes, your funding carries over. There's no process. So if you end up spending down your money faster than planned, that's fine. If you spend it slower than planned, that's fine. the money is obligated for the whole project. So there isn't any annual holdup. What is the fiscal year for NRCS? It's the same as the federal fiscal year. So our fiscal year ends September 30th. So the month of September can be a real nightmare to try to get things done. So that's one of the reasons we've shifted our whole grant cycle. We used to get all of our grant awards done before September 30th, and it was very messy. And so this gives us, we're able to do a better job by doing it off that season. But your awards your reporting and your awards are all going to be based on the award start date, not the federal fiscal year. Okay. See, have I missed any questions?
Caroline, I'm going through the chat. I don't see any.
Okay.
Feel free to raise your hands if we've missed your questions, but I believe we've gotten to them all.
Okay, that's great. So if a question comes up later, no worries, just email us. It looks like we have 45 minutes before our next talk. So Crystal's going to join us at 1:15 to talk about, I believe that's right. Does that sound right, everyone? Let me look at our agenda. Yes, 1:15 to 2. She's going to talk about processes from the grants and agreements side and go into a little bit more detail on some of these things like prior approvals. Okay, so with that, I can give everyone 45 minutes to check your email, get lunch, and we'll see you back here at 1:15. Does that sound good?
Yes, thank you.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.